Hi everyone, so I'm doing again my inventory check-in, and my first video I'm going to start from my Vandas. If you haven't watched my last year's inventory check-in, basically what I do is I go through all my plants and I just give my thoughts about them. This is Ascocentrum pusillum, and it's doing really well for me. You can see this leaf is quite a bit longer. No signs of spikes, but I feel pretty good about this plant. This one is Vanda pumilla. It's been growing well for me. It does have a weird problem with the leaves here, where it kind of curves, but it kind of fixes itself. I'm a little concerned how it's going to do in my new place, because pumilla, as well as cristata, which I'll show next, they're a bit more cooler growing. Not cold, but like cooler. And my place is actually fairly warm, but overall it's doing fine so far. No signs of spikes though. And this one is Vanda cristata. You can see it also actually has a bit of a worse problem with the curving of the leaves, although it seems to straighten itself out. I have a bit of a problem keeping this plant hydrated. The leaves are not as stiff as the pumilla. I just put it in the pot just so it's easier to keep around. I don't have a lot of hanging space currently. I'm also concerned how well this is going to do in my new place because, again, it is very warm, whereas my other place is a lot cooler. So this one is just doing okay. This one is Aerides flabellata, and I was a bit concerned that maybe something is wrong with this, but it's actually doing pretty well in my new place. And it also decided to push out a flower spike, so I am very happy with this plant. Hopefully the spike survives and I actually get flowers, so I'm keeping a close eye on this. So this is Vanda falcata, or Neofinetia falcata, Kutsuwamushi, and it's doing fine. Like a lot of plants, there's no flower spike, and I keep expecting this to have flower spikes, but nope. Instead, I have a couple new growths, and you can see another one growing there. So I guess that's a good sign. It definitely needs to have its moss changed, but it's doing fine. That's going to be the theme of this year. It's doing fine. And this is my Pteroceras longicalcareum, and it's doing fine. No major updates on this plant. Haven't seen any signs of buds. There are some nubbins, well, a couple nubbins growing on the stems on a couple of the growths, but nothing really significant to report. This is Brachypeza laotica, and I think has a fungus problem. There were two leaves before that were pretty infected and quite dark, and I was advised to cut those off, so I did. But you can see the new leaf now has a few spots, which is not good, but hopefully it doesn't get too bad. The good thing though is these older bottom leaves are completely clean, so that's a good sign. So just keeping my eye on this. And this is Gastrochilis obliquus. It's doing fairly well for me. It has 4 flower spikes. I'm really excited to see the flowers on this one. It also does have a fungus problem as well. You can see the leaves are not very good, but this leaf and I think that one, they're completely unmarked. So I think that's a good sign. And this one is Aerides houlletiana. I think last year, and actually several times, I've said that I wanted to put it in a vase, but that's just not happening. So I'm keeping it bare roots. It's doing okay. Hasn't deteriorated since I've moved here. Like a lot of my plants, I am having trouble with watering it, but with my new watering strategy, I'm hoping I can do a better job. No signs of spikes, but the plant is doing well. This is Vanda coerulescens. So the flowers and that spike finally died, but that's fine. It's growing well. Also, there was a spike starting, but it hadn't developed. It's still there and it's still green, so we'll see if it develops further. So this one is Ascocentrum ampullaceum. Out of all my bare root free hanging Vandas, it's doing the worst, mainly because all the flower spikes had destroyed like the leaves, so there's a bunch of bald spots, but it's growing a new fan on that growth there. So I'm hoping that will do very well. Overall, it's a little dehydrated actually, but that's a me problem. So, I mean, I still like this plant and I'm hoping I can get much better blooms next year. So we'll see how this turns out. And this is my Renanthera monachica. It's doing well, but it still won't bloom for me. I think it's a bit unrealistic for me actually to expect any blooms from any plants this year. But I've had this one for a very long time and no signs of spike, so a little annoyed, but the plant is pretty large, I think. So next year maybe, we'll see. And this is Vanda foetida. It's doing very well. It has a very, well, not very, but it has a large wingspan, so it's more like a medium seedling. Maybe it's not big enough to be a medium seedling, but it's definitely a lot bigger. I don't think it's not a blooming size at all, I don't think, but yeah, it seems pretty happy. Surprisingly not filled up this whole cup full of roots, but I think that's fine. So yeah, this is doing well. I'm really excited to see how big I can get this guy to grow. And this is Vanda insignis. It's also doing very well. The leaves are getting longer. It's growing new leaves all the time. Nothing else to report. Still fairly small. It's definitely smaller than the foetida, but I can see the progress happening here, so I'm very happy. This is Aerides quinquevelnera, and they got sunburned. I initially had it in that position, but because the sun comes this way, this is a southwest facing window, so the sun comes this way, and it got burned pretty bad. So I've moved it slightly to this position, and it hasn't gotten worse, which is good. Other than that, it's growing fine. No signs of spikes. Maybe December, because the last time it spiked for me was December. So fingers crossed, but I'm hoping the sunburn hasn't really been too much of a detriment for it. So this is Vanda lamellata. I think the last time I showed this plant, it had started to form a flower spike, and I'm disappointed to report that the flower spike had fizzled out. It hadn't even gone past like this much from the base there, so it's pretty disappointing, but also totally not unexpected. So I know this guy is blooming size, but I think it needs more humidity. Also, the change in environment probably didn't help, but yeah, this guy is definitely a steady grower. I'm happy to have it, but you gotta bloom now. This is Staurochilus fasciatus. It's pushed out a new leaf, so that's good. It's a little weird at the top there, but I think that's fine. And I just noticed that it's also starting to push out a new root nubbin, so that's very good. Oh, actually there's one down there too. And I also saw one on the other side. So yeah, I have a feeling this will perk up for me, so it just needs a bit of time. Seems happy in this spot, no sunburn or anything, so that's good. This one is Papilionanthe taiwaniana. It's actually a little bit dehydrated. Just watered it yesterday. And this bit here that I thought was a flower spike hasn't really done anything. There's also a bunch of nubbins growing in this area. I think I'm drastically underestimating how much I need to water these guys. My new place is a lot warmer, but I obviously haven't adapted my watering habits to match. Overall, I think this plant will be fine. I just need to water more frequently. Alrighty, so here are the other Vandas or Vandaceous orchids. This is Trichoglottis pusilla. It had a flower spike starting there, but it had since dried out. And I noticed it started to crack at the top there. I guess where that leaf was growing. I'm not sure why. It doesn't look infected or anything like that. It's just cracked open. And this is my Ascocentrum miniatum or Gary, and it spiked for me and it's in bloom, so that's very good. It's doing well in vase culture. And here's a close-up of the flowers. And this one is Vanda Brachypeza. It doesn't seem to be absorbing a lot of water. Like, I noticed the moss stays wet longer than my Aerides Bangkok Sunset. It is growing though, so I mean, it looks fine. It doesn't look like it's dying. I think Orchidea and Rizquetzel also has this plant, so if you guys are watching this video, let me know how your Brachypeza is doing. But yeah, it's doing fine. No signs of spikes. Not sure what's going on with the roots. I don't really want to bother it too much, but it looks fine otherwise. And this is my Vanda tricolor seedling from Orchidea. It's doing very well in a vase culture. Look how big this leaf is. It's very, very long. It's overall pretty happy. Very slow growing, but it's doing well. Still only has one root from the base of the plant, but yeah, happy with this so far. This is Aeridocentrum Gewgaw. I think it should be blooming size at this point, but I've yet to see any flower spikes. This growth is doing pretty okay. This one seems to have a fungus problem that isn't resolving itself. Also, I'm not really doing anything about it, to be frank. I mean, I don't want to cut off all the leaves, otherwise there's not going to be much left. But this one hasn't been affected, so that's a good sign. But otherwise, it's still growing a new leaf from the top on this one, so it's still alive, so that's good. And this one is Vanda Jene. It's probably the worst of all my Vandas. I've had it for a while. It only has 3 new root tips. They're not particularly strong, but they are still alive. And you can see here that there has been some growth, but it's very, very slow. I'm still planning on keeping this around. I think it'll be fine. I think once the roots really develop strongly, it'll be a very good plant, but at this stage, it's just super slow. This is my Renanthera tenoglossum. It's doing well on the kulog. No signs of buds. I still like the way it's set up on the kulog. It's pretty convenient. Yeah, nothing else to say about that. This is my Staurochilus erinaceus. I had expected this to be a better grower for me for some reason. I don't know if that's logical for me to think that way, but that was just my expectations. It has this new leaf, and these leaves, compared to the old ones, they're not as big. So I wonder why. No signs of spikes or anything like that. Again, it's just fine, but I want it to grow better for me. Alrighty, so this is my pride and joy, Vanda obliquus. It's very happy. It has 2 flower spikes with a lot of buds on it, so that's very good. I think the last time I mentioned this plant, it had a 3rd one that was just starting, but I think that aborted, so that's too bad, but also, I mean, there's 2, so that's pretty good. Still has a keiki, but it kind of paused on that, I guess, to deal with the flower spikes, but I'm very excited to see the flowers on this one again. This is Aerides Bangkok Sunset. It seems to be doing better here than in my old place. That leaf has a weird stripe on it, but the latest leaf does not. So that's a good sign. I hate that it's a little bit crooked in the pot, but I'm just gonna leave it for now. No signs of flower spikes or anything. Overall, it seems adequately happy. Feel like there's anything really wrong with it other than it's slow. Alrighty, so last but not least is my Vanda leucostile flask. I think I mentioned that I would unflask it, but I haven't had time. That doesn't seem to be a detriment though. Everything seems fine in the flask, although they're getting kind of big, so I probably should deflask it at some point within the next couple weeks, hopefully, but we'll see. So I recently got a new acquisition from Roehampton Orchids. It's a type of Vanda called Grossodia appendiculata. So I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but the tag is there for you to see. I'm on a bit of an orchid diet this year, so I can't spend too much money, but I found that this is a super interesting plant and I really wanted to get it. So yeah, that's a new thing for me. Alrighty, so those are my Vandas. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next check-in. Thanks, bye. No.